Okay, we're going to show you how to set up your Cortex and your test bed. So the first thing you'll need to do is actually have your device assembled here, like we have. You're going to want to first know where things are going to get plugged in. So here on the Robot C, when you go on, you're going to load up whatever program you want to put on our Cortex here, and we're going to then uh, click on the motors and sensor setup. So on the motors and sensor setup, if you have not done so already, on the test bed, we're going to go to standard models and we're going to pick the GTT test bed. And that's going to automatically set up those different devices that we're using to the Cortex. It's already going to assign them a port. So when we go to motors and we go to the analog and digital sensors, we've already given those devices a name because all these devices on our test bed need a name. So our motors, we have right and left motor, a potentiometer, and some of our switches and a line tracker. Those all need a name, just like we have names. So they're all given a name, and then where they're going to get plugged in. So we have some items that are going to get plugged into the digital ports, some in the analog ports, and we have our two motors, and it will also set what kind of device that is. So when we go and we use this, it needs to know what it is that's plugged in. So not only a name, but it'll need to know what it is. So that is already set up here when you do this configuration. So when you go do your actual own builds, you're going to have to set these things up yourself. So just makes things a little quicker here when you're working with the Cortex and the test bed. So what we need to see is here what device gets plugged into where. So let's go start with the motors. We have the right motor and the left motor. So the right motor is going to get plugged into port 1 of the motors. So over here we have our motors here, and we have ports 1 through 10. So 1 is up here and 10's down here. So I want to make sure I plug the right motor into the correct port, because if I have it plugged into the incorrect port, it won't work. It won't work properly. So we're going to make sure we plug those into the correct spots. And when I plug these in, I want to be very careful that I don't bend those leads at the end of my wires, because if those break off, especially into the Cortex, that could be a real problem. So once we get the motor set, we have the analog sensors. So we have a line follower and our potentiometer. So our potentiometer is going to go into analog 2, and our line follower, let's do the line follower first, into analog 1. Okay, so um, we're going to make sure we put those in, and our potentiometer will go in right next to it. Okay, so once we get those plugged, then we just keep moving along, and we have our 4 digital sensors. We'll get our limit switch first, because that is going to be number 1 on the digital. So you want to be careful when you're plugging these in, because the digital and the analog meet right up next to each other, and it's easy to get those mixed up there. So we need to make sure that those are in the right spot. Alright, so then the bump switch will come next, so it just goes down one spot. So as long as I get that first one in the right spot, then the other one should be in the right spot. Okay, and then I have 2 LEDs. Those LEDs would go down here. I don't have those, so we'll imagine I plug those in on ports 11 and 12 of the digital. Make sure you don't plug in on the very bottom here. It's the speaker, so there's a speaker that can be attached to here, so you can make noise, but that one is just for a speaker, so you want to make sure you get it in the right spot. Okay, so once you get everything plugged in, we've checked our sensors made sure we have things plugged into the right place. Now we need to go ahead and um, plug this in. So you wire up your hardware first to make sure that is correct, so we have everything in the right spot. Now we need our USB drive uh, uh, cable. So we'll plug one end in on the computer, and both ends are the same, so it doesn't matter. And we'll plug the other end in here to our Cortex. And so we'll plug that in. And you're going to be careful when you're plugging that in that you don't bend anything. Okay. So once you plug that in, you should see two lights light up. It should be the robot and the game. And right now the game is flashing, the robot light is flashing, and the robot light is red, and the game light is green, which is good. We don't have a battery plugged in, so that's why the robot LED is red. The VexNet should not be lit up. So if that's lit up at all, then we have a problem. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to go ahead and we could download the program to our Cortex, um, and then it will ask to make sure there's a battery plugged in. So we could plug in the battery now, but I'm going to go ahead and download the program. So up here at the top of the screen, there are some buttons up here, and we're going to make this a little smaller, make this a little bigger so we can see everything. There we go. Okay. So the first thing you'll want to do is before you download the code to the robot is to click compile program, and what that does is it checks your code, which is this part here, that if everything is okay as far as how you wrote the code. So if you get any red X's right here on this gray bar, that means that there's a problem with that line of code. So my code is good. So once I check that, then I can download it to the Cortex. So I'll click download to robot, and if you get this message, because we don't have the battery plugged in, we could go in and plug that battery in now, so that when we run the code, it actually runs the the, the devices attached to it, because that's how it's getting power. So you're going to take your battery pack, and you want to make sure you're holding the plastic end here, not the wires, because the wires can pop out, and they're kind of hard to put in, and if you break off parts, they don't stay in. So we're going to plug the battery in to the port there, and the switch right next to it will flip up, and the robot light will turn on. The game light is still going to be flashing, which is exactly what we want. So we'll go ahead and click OK, and now it's going to ask us to start the code. So as long as your Cortex is plugged into the computer, you're going to have to click start in order to actually get the code to run. You should see some different stuff going on down here. So if you see the sensors tab here, you'll see your sensors showing up, which is a good thing because we want the Cortex to see those. So that's how you get your code to get loaded onto the Cortex.